Number one, we need to read the question first, so that by the time we are going to do or to read the comprehension, we have these questions in mind. And
kindly realize, and we want to show a very good picture.
okay, good morning. So we are going to discuss paper 2 and we are beginning with comprehension. I'll be your facilitator for the better part of it. Then Madam Mercy will be joining. So before we begin a comprehension, we need to first read the questions, and after understanding the questions, we go back to the comprehension, to the story. As we are reading that story, one, we need to understand that every question that is set, its answer is in that question. So we need to have it at our back so that you get ready for the question. So first read the entire passage and get a general understanding of the content, paying attention to the main points. During that time, now that we have the questions at the back of our minds, we need to highlight the key points, mark important details, unfamiliar phrases, or phrases that seem significant. That is when we have the questions with us. Mentally summarize and paraphrase every paragraph that we are reading so that we have the real story with us. Look for key points when reading for answers now. You must ensure that you have those key points or keywords that are in the comprehension to guide us on having the right answers and locate relevant information for each question that we have. I know when we are answering these questions, answer them based on a text. That is, you need to answer, or your answer must be supported by evidence from the passage. We are not just reading and leaving them there. We must have our answers supported, and also we need to answer them in our own words. We are stopping this issue of copy pasting or lifting and we write them there. We need to have a supporting or supportive evidence to each and every answer we are giving. In our answers, we must be detailed. We must be very detailed, and we should, when I'm talking about being detailed, you should include the information or include enough information for that question to fully address it, and also use the allocated marks or points to guide your level of answer. Sometimes we get questions that have 2 marks or 3 marks, but we insist or we try to put just 2 marks there or 2 points, but sometimes they need further explanations. Like for example, when you are given a question on explain, we will want the 3 parts. You identify, you illustrate, then you do what? You give the effectiveness. So in most cases we leave the effectiveness part. Thus we get less marks, and at the end of the day we don't get the points that we need. Sometimes there is comprehension. In that comprehension there is the grammar question, and in most cases we will mark it as a grammar. So that's why we must have the correct tense, and in all those questions we are answering, ensure that that tense is considered. Address all parts of the question, make sure you answer every part of a multiple part question. Failure to do so can result to 0. So ensure that you consider all those parts. Something else that we need to understand about comprehension is that in most cases, most of the question 1, if it's not directly picked from paragraph 1, then it can be over your general view about comprehension as a whole. So let's understand it and let's get it right. Okay. Now, from that juncture, I would wish to invite Madam Mercy to help us go through the question paper itself. Thank you.
Was talking about the unseen text. Now remember, every other thing we have taught you. And we also went ahead and brought in a facilitator to take you through elements that are important that you should be able to understand. We have asked you to always follow the rubrics of the question, especially when there are some questions that demand some aspects. For example, comparison and contrast. In English, comparison is similarity as opposed to a subject like geography, where comparison can be differences. And contrast or juxtaposition is the differences. And for us, it means that if we ask you for a comparison, we expect that you bring in some words that will show that you're actually comparing. Such words as both, all, and if we have a contrast, we use words like while, yet, however, whereas, on the other hand, such like words. And remember this cuts across question 1, 2, and 3. Even if you're asked to compare the character traits of Meamosi and Nicole, probably in an exact, it will only be scored if you use those words and say why Meamosi is corrupt, Nicole is incorruptible, and you bring in an illustration that is relevant in that particular instance. We are talking about instances like summary and note making or note taking. Those are elements that you should be able to master as at now. Remember that when you're doing summary, you are writing in prose and you are writing in complete sentences, meaning that your sentences should be complete. the ones that are hanging are going to be penalized because that is supposed to be prose. And you should be able to use conjunctions, if possible, to join. If not, write a complete sentence, put a full stop, begin from the next. Remember, they usually give you number of words. They would either ask you to give about or in 50 words or in about 50 words or in less than 50 words. It is serious business. So you have to count those words. Once you reach the 50th word and we said in less than 50 words, we reach the 49th word, we put a parallel line or parallel line and we stop there. If your sentence does not make sense, we do not continue with giving you the mark. Remember that this is an area where most of it, the answers are in the comprehension. You are not going to borrow your answers from elsewhere. Even if you're asked about an opinion will be derived from what is given in the passage. So according to what the author says, that is where you derive your opinion. If we are talking about attitude, mood, and tone, it will still be derived from what the author has decided to use. The diction. Diction is the choice of words that an author decides to use in our work of or art or even any writing to direct you towards their tone, towards their attitude, towards their mood over the topic that they are talking about. So ensure that you follow the rubrics of questions. And especially, I will jump again to question 3, because question 2 will be handled generally and also in relation to what we did in our pre-KCSE exam. I would like us to note that in this question, the theme text. The theme text means that we have interacted with it in class. We have been taught about it. It is not new to us. And this text should be very easy to go through because it is not new. It's not something we are meeting for the first time. And there are some questions that we expect to be said. For example, I usually look at 6 areas that they usually set. That there will be plots. Plots means the events as they are happening in the story. And this plot can be set in different ways. You can be asked, give what happens before the event. That is plot. You should have read the text. So therefore, there is no way that you're going to score without reading the set text. So anyone who is preparing to sit for paper 2 on 4, you should have read the Samaritan from page 1 up to page 139. And you should be able to relate what happened from the first page to the end. You should be able to know the setting. Are we in the principal's boardroom, not office? Are we in Madingo Golf Club in Sky Room? Or are we in which room? Jungle Room. Are we in Nicole's office? Are we in the school hall in Sagrada Secondary School? And this has a linear plot, so it's easier for you to understand. So when you go to question 3 again, it still asks you on things that deal with the plot of the story. I was just relating what question 2 does and question 3. Now, in question 3, the plot of the story will be asked as a comprehension to show that you have understood what you have read. So, in question 3, we expect that you will read what will be provided for you, either as an oral song or a story, a narrative. And as you read it, you internalize every aspect that is being asked. So that when you're asked, why did maybe the woman decide to take more than what she needed to eat, then that answer will be found in the comprehension. So you should read so that you understand what happened throughout the whole story up to the. I think in question 2, Ms. Isaiah will go through the 6 questions that are being talked about, which can be replicated in question 3. Notes. Number 2, thematic concerns or themes or social issues or subject matter. It depends on how it will be said. It can be said, what are identify 2 subject matters presented in the narrative? That is still theme. That is still social issues. That is still thematic concern. So, interpret the question in relation to what you are asking. And remember, we have said that when we are looking at paper 2 is the bulk of the English paper out of 8. And if we will be able to score massively in paper 2, not saying that we should score this one in 1 and 3, it will be able to help us get to our expected mean. Thematic concern, whether we like it or not, I believe it will be addressed in one way or the other. Let us have things that we have had over time. Religion, love and marriage, tradition, deceit, greed. We cannot start by saying theme of jealousy. We can have a character trait of someone being jealous and not jealousy, someone being jealous, but we can't have a theme that is jealousy. But there are some things that can also bring out the character traits of people. Because if we have corruption, if we have religion in that particular narrative, then that means at least there is a character who is religious, or there is a character who is corrupt, or there is a character who is incorruptible, because for them there is corruption in that particular society, but they do not get influenced to corruption. Again, we are expecting characterization, which I've already also talked about. Bring out the correct character or the correct character trait. It can be framed as, what is the personality of lion? Personality is still what? Character. What do, in this case, if they are talking about a character, what do we learn about lion? You can still give responses of character traits. What is the character of lion? It will still remain that and direct. So there are different ways in which these questions can be brought to us. We can also be asked to bring out stylistic devices. Now remember, stylistic devices can be general. Identify the stylistic features that are there in this oral narrative. That one is general up to the end. But then we have a question that is fed on typical styles or typical stylistic features that are in oral narrative. Typical means that if we take even 5 narratives, we are going to find that feature. So learn to differentiate the two. And we have said that try and begin with the first 5 obvious ones. Opening formula is typical. Because oral narratives are said to be something of a fantastic word. We transport your mind into the world of fantasy. Long time ago, once upon a time, many years ago, and still that opening formula can also become another typical feature called what? Timelessness. To mean that that story can be told at any point in time and it still will be relevant. The moral lesson will still apply. The third one is closing formula, which is found at the end. And they live happily ever after, and that is the end of my story, and that is why, and that is how. Those are closing formula. They show that the story has come to an end. They bring back the mind of the narrator. Sorry, the mind of the audience from the world of fantasy to the world of reality. They introduce or they showcase the new narrator who's coming. And remember, we are saying that moral lessons go through stages. You say the moral, and then you go to the story and tell us who did what and what was the consequence of their action. Something else that I'll say at an early time about moral lessons. Moral lessons are universal. So more often than not, put your answers with we should, we ought to, people should, people ought to. Don't say you're not the only one learning. Don't say you. Exempting yourself from that lesson. It is all of us. So we should, we ought to, we are expected to. So that's the way you frame your moral. And then the fifth one is fantasy, which some other people struggle with what? Personification. But you will realize that sometimes there is a fantastic world that might not have what? Personification. For example, I like this example of something like maybe a tortoise flying, or what you call a tortoise flying, or a zebra flying. You cannot say a zebra flying is personification. Not characterization, but classification of narratives. Or even if it's an oral song, classify it well. No, when we say a narrative is dilemma, we have to have an ending that somebody does not have a solution over something because they are spoiled for choice. They don't know whether to go left or right. When we say that a narrative is a trickster, it doesn't mean that every time you see here, they are tricking somebody. They might, but not necessarily. When we say it's an archaeological tale, when we say it's a myth. And remember, to separate some myth from an archaeological tale is that myths are majorly about natural phenomena. And they involve supernatural beings that have supernatural powers. And like maybe archaeological tales that some might. Because when you read at an advanced stage, you realize that archaeological tales, most of them they emanate from myths. But learn to separate the two. And you cannot give a classification without an identification. What am I saying? Paper 2 requires illustrations from the beginning. Maybe what I can say is exempted from illustration is question 4 and question 1. But question 1 I cannot say is exempted because some questions are asking you to do what? Illustrate. Identify the mood and illustrate. Or why does this person behave this way? Illustrate. Illustration is important. What am I advising? Let us illustrate regardless of whether we are required or not, because you don't lose by writing. You only lose by not writing. And again, I will emphasize, if we are asked for two character traits, if you what if the next before and give illustrations, you stand a better chance of scoring the full marks. Unlike somebody who just quickly writes two and finds out that either one or the two of them are no. In paper two, we don't say that mark the first two, no. If a learner has written 5 traits and we are expected to look for one, we mark all the 5 and give for the one that is correct. And again, I will say, employ the use of the word and instead of a stroke. A stroke means that they are the same. And means that you are introducing a new thing. So if you say hardworking, okay, I'm not telling you to do this, but it happens to do. Hardworking and wise. Those are two different things. Eh? You get it right, eh? So that's two different. So that if you have the illustration, and the illustration you have is for hardworking. Hardworking will respond. And that should also apply to the thematic concern. Because in the thematic concern, again, that's what is happening. There is a question that usually says, if we are able, or if we have read, what do we learn about this community? Now, what do we learn about this community? Or what do we learn about the people in this narrative? That question is open. Why is it open? You can say anything so long as it is in the passage or in the narrative. You can say that they go to church, then illustrate. In a place where they say, and the people woke up early in the morning to go to church. But remember, when you are asked character traits, you can't say that they go to church, isn't it? For character traits, it will be there religious. So when they ask you, what do you learn? You can even bring in social, political activities, economic activities. They practice livestock keeping. Then you illustrate. Remember, illustrations are important, not that a must. And we are talking about relevant and correct illustration. Underline at the back of your mind. Amen. So we have talked about the what do we know, and we have separated it from the question on character traits or characterization. There is a question where you can be asked, what is the role? What is the role of a particular character in that particular essay? Not essay, but passage or narrative. What is their role? Number one is that they enhance the plot, or they enable the continuity of the story. That means that, in layman language, that without them, the story would not have continued. For example, if even we take it to the Samaritan, and we have somebody like Nicole, and we are told that what is the role of Nicole? Nicole helps the plot to continue. Because if she's not there, then we don't have a what? A story. Mostly enables the story to continue, because without him, we don't have a story. So it enhances the plot, or it enables the continuity of the story. That is on the role of a character. Another role of a character is that this character brings out the character traits of other characters. See that not their own. They cannot bring out their own character traits. They are bringing out character traits of others. Because through them, we get to know that others are greedy. Through them, we get to know others are corrupt. Through them, we get to know others are jealous. Through them, we get to know others are religious. Number three, they bring out the thematic concern or theme. So through a character, you can see the theme of deceit. Even if you go back to question 2, through Moses, you can see the theme of corruption. Through him, through them, you can see the theme of abuse of. Just like if we have question 3, if we have a character, probably like peacock, and then you say through peacock, you can see the theme of greed. If at all, peacock is greed. So thematic concern is also an issue that they usually bring out. Another thing that they do is that they help develop style. If we have a woman having a one-on-one with a frog, and you have the one, then the woman brings out the style of dialogue. And you bring out the words that are said by the woman and the words that are said by the frog. So they develop style. Through this character, you can see a flash. Through this character, you can bring out a simile because when they speak, they talk about a simile. Or through them, they bring out a metaphor. So you say develop style that should be taken through. You realize that through the woman, we can develop the moral lesson of we should be content. Or somebody can also say we should follow an attitude. An attitude. Through a character, you can see a tone, you can see a mood, you can see an attitude. Where we have mostly bring out an attitude of fear or a fearful that we can think through his word. Yeah? So it can set the tone. Same as effectiveness of style that Mr. Simon was talking about. If you ask to identify, illustrate, and explain, or just say that's the normal. I think I'm even done in relation to that question, but I would like us to just look at it very fast. The questions that were sent for KCSE 2019, apart from the grammar, not grammar, but the comprehension questions, you have to be ready for questions that require you to think. When you are asked, how would you describe the first son from what he says? That's what they're asking you on character traits. Very good. Why was the first son almost despairing? That is a comprehension question. How does the father prepare his sons for a life without him? Still, that is comprehension. What is implied about the islanders? What is implied? Meaning you have to go and understand who are these, what type of people are these? And then you're asked to illustrate. What two lessons do we learn from this story? That was in 2019. The next one was in March 2022, although you have to understand that this was the COVID era, so we had exams running successively in 2 years, but in different years. They spilled over. The first question was, what kind of narrative is this? Explain your answer. That is classification. Why was Career worried about losing the necklace? That is comprehension. Identify and illustrate 3 character traits of Career's mother. That is characterization. What is the role of Career's grandmother in the narrative? What I was talking about. Identify 2 instances of irony. Remember, for you to show irony, you have to use a word of contrast. Yet, however, meanwhile, whereas. They can even say, identify 2 metaphors, so that they don't take you the stylistic way. They don't ask you identify style. They give you a specific style. And then they say, identify elements of symbolism or 2 instances of symbolism, and then you are just to explain. So you have to explain, you go a step further and say what those symbols mean. The next question was identify and illustrate 3 things we learned. Now this one is specific from the culture of the community. And then the last one was explain the message of this story, which is more or less. In 2023, in not more than 3 sentences. Now that one, they are testing both what? Summary. They are testing paraphrasing because you use your own words. And then they're also testing the question. Explain what this narrative is about. In not more than 3 sentences, explain what this narrative is about. That can also be thematic concern because it can go 2 ways. You can say, the story is about this. That is number 1. And then you go and explain how is it brought about in the story. A woman is deceived. Maybe others to add something. And at the end, this is what happens. That's a second sentence. Remember, a sentence will only be a sentence after you put a what? A full stop. Or a relevant end punctuation mark. Number 2, and explain 1 instance of irony. Still, they have not asked us type. They have just asked us to do what? They have given us the type they want us to identify. Explain the meaning of the phrase, he walked for. So those ones are like idioms, or idiomatic phrases. Number 3, what type of narrative is this? Again, what? Classification. Remember, classification doesn't have to come as number 1. It can even come as number 5. Illustrate or explain your answer. That's the next reason. Explain your answer. The next one. Describe the character of monkey as portrayed in this narrative. Characterization. Next. Identify and explain 4 features of oral narrative evidence in this story. Identify and the question says identify and explain. Meaning you have to go, you have to say opening formula, then say once upon a time, then say the effect of that once upon a time. So you can say identify and explain. Don't just put directly to just identify, illustrate. Go through it. If you are confused, you don't know what to do, then just put the 3 of them. The first, whatever is needed will be now. That's how. That is a survival tactic. Then identify and illustrate 1 lesson that we learn from this story on how to deal with characters who are stronger and more powerful than other characters. Then that means you should have understood the story and then you bring in a moral. I think when that is said and done, then it will be easy for you to realize that all these 3 KCSE cannot lie to us as to what probably we are expected to do. Isn't it? Thank you.
Good afternoon, boys. I'm going to have to revise question 1, the passage. So, because I believe we all have we are not going to read the passage. We just go straight to the questions and then we provide answers that I expect all of us to participate. So, the first question 1. I believe if I get me from behind, I am going to get me. So, question one, explain how parents have contributed to the moral decay of their children. So, we have the word explain, meaning you have taken note of that. You are not noting, you have to give us an explanation of how these parents have contributed to the moral decay of their children. So we have 2 marks here, so we expect you to give 2 points so that we mark 1 each. So they have failed as role models for their children. That is point 1. And point 2, parents have not played their role fully in raising their children. So according to the passage, we see some things that parents do that influence their children negatively. That one is in paragraph 1 and paragraph 2. So you can get illustration from the 2 paragraphs. So question 2, give the factors leading to teenage pregnancy. So factors leading to teenage pregnancy, we have 3 marks. So we expect 1 mark, you give 3 answers so that we mark 1 each. So in this case, so 1, parents are failures. So poor role modeling from parents, as many parents are engaging carelessly marital relationship. So these ones affect the teenagers as they may get pregnancy. Then we have question 2, and point 2. Parents have not played their roles in guiding their children about relationship or about interaction. So they do not know how to interact with the opposite sex, and therefore they end up getting pregnant. And then lastly, children do not understand what it means